You need to pay off the debt of your father, son. My father's childhood friend stormed into my workplace. If you can't pay for that, you marry my daughter. I am going to stay right here until you agree to date with her. Getting back the money he lent is not his real purpose. His real intention is to get me married to his daughter, my dad's childhood friend's girl. But why is he so persistent in pushing a date with his daughter? I was getting more curious about the hidden reason behind his action. My name is Aiden Bradford. I am 28 years old and I work at a factory. My dad started a small factory when he was my age, and together with my mom, they've been running it ever since. In the neighborhood, there is a man named Bob Miller, who is a childhood friend of my dad's, running a factory in the same industry. Bob also started his factory around the same time as my dad and still continues to manage it with his wife, just like my father does. Our family and Bob's family are close, sharing resources and manpower when one business falls short. Bob's daughter, Emily, is the same age as me. We've been childhood friends, attending the same school since kindergarten to junior high school. I have been harboring feelings for Emily since kindergarten. Emily and I were each other's first loves during our kindergarten years. I used to cry my eyes out from the loneliness of having to part from Emily after school, much to the dismay of my teachers and my mom. In our neighborhood park, Emily and I promised to get married in the future and even played pretend weddings. Even after entering elementary school, my relationship with Emily didn't change, and we would play together and do homework after school every day. I want to live together when we grow up, and on our days off we can play and go out just like we do now. What kind of house do you want to live in? I want a house with a big backyard. We would talk about our future almost every day. I expected our happy days to continue even when we grow older. Even now, I vividly remember the pure, youthful love I had with Emily, filled with such hopes and dreams. However, my days with Emily got interrupted when I entered junior high school. The distance between us started to grow wider due to an intruder. It was when I was in the 6th grade. Both my dad and Bob were achieving good results in their businesses, but their friendship began to sprout rivalry. I've hired 7 fresh graduates from a technical school this year. My business has been doing well recently, so I've increased the manpower. What a relief. Hearing this, my dad counted. Even if you increase the manpower, it's just more personnel costs. I can increase profits more efficiently at a lower cost. He then introduced the latest machinery. The machine my dad introduced was initially cost-effective and capable of precise, high-speed operations. However, it required frequent maintenance, and if not properly maintained, it would easily malfunction. My dad couldn't handle the difficult machine properly, and after introducing the new machine, he ended up losing a lot of money due to immediate repairs. Bob lent my dad some money and introduced him to a familiar mechanic. "I'm sorry for causing trouble for you two because of me," my dad apologized to us. My mom replied, "Don't be sorry for us. We should be thanking Bob for helping us." In the spring of my first year of junior high school, the 3 of us, my dad, my mom, and I, visited Bob's house. If Bob hadn't helped me, I would have had to close the factory. I can't thank you enough. It may take some time, but I promise to repay the money. Following my dad, my mom and I also bowed our heads to Bob. Then Bob laughed. "We're childhood friends, aren't we? It makes me feel uncomfortable when you're so formal and thanking me like that." However, my father responded firmly, "No, even if we're childhood friends, I cannot be discourteous." Seeing my dad like that, Bob looked as if he was pondering something and then said, "I'm not good with formal manners, but if that's going to make you worry, then how about you listen to one thing I say?" My dad responded eagerly, "Sure, I'll listen to anything." Without looking at my dad, Bob looked at me and said, "If you marry my daughter, you don't have to repay your father's debt," and he smiled slightly. My dad, Mom, and I were all astonished, but my dad said, "Marriage is something the two individuals should decide. Can't you suggest something that's within my power?" My mom also added, "Even if it takes time, we will definitely repay the money. Please let them decide who they marry on their own." However, Bob responded, "No, I'm satisfied if you just take my daughter as your wife. I won't ask anything else." He then forced us out of the house. It's true that we promised to get married when we were in kindergarten, and we talked about our future marriage in elementary school. But now that I'm in junior high school, I think differently. Marriage requires the consent of both parties. This forceful demand for an arranged marriage completely disregards the feelings of those involved. Even when we got home, both of my dad and mom were left speechless. Days later, Emily's mom, Harper, said to me, "My husband did what? It's probably just a joke. You don't need to worry about it, Aiden." That's what she told me. But on the Monday of the following week, my classmates were buzzing when I got to school. "Hey, you guys are engaged." My classmate, Logan, brought it up and the whole class got excited. On the whiteboard was a congratulatory message. "Congrats on your engagement," with me and Emily's names and our caricatures drawn out. I turned pale and lost my words. In place of my voicelessness, our teacher, who just entered the classroom, yelled out loud, "You guys, stop spreading nonsense," even going as far as to doodle on the whiteboard. "This will delay lesson." The teacher, angrily, quickly erased the whiteboard. Later, I was summoned by the teacher, and he told me a shocking truth. It was about that Emily's dad going around telling everyone in a PTA meeting that we were engaged. Then the teacher said, "You're in junior high school. Don't take the misguided words of an adult seriously. If your classmates say anything, don't hesitate to talk to me," and lightly patted my shoulder. I was shocked that my long-held feelings for Emily were known to my classmates and got teased about it. It seemed like Emily felt the same way. She started ignoring me completely in class. All I did was liking Emily. What did I do wrong? I felt intense anger towards Emily's dad. I couldn't focus on studying, and my test scores plummeted. Even if by coincidence Emily and I arrived at school around the same time. What a lovely couple, starting the day off hot and heavy. Logan and the others would tease us like so. Emily would glare at me and yell, "Don't follow me, stay away." Seeing this, Logan and others would comment, "Marital quarrel. They say fighting makes you closer, right? LOL," and they'd tease us again. I was hurt to be hated by Emily, whom I liked, and I started skipping school. But Dad would yell at me in the morning, "Go to school. Shut up. All this started because you bought that useless machine and got into debt." When I retorted, Dad would just quietly look sad. I didn't like seeing Dad's face like that either, and I started going to school again. But this kind of life continued only during my 7th grade. By the time I got to 8th grade, the rumors about us disappeared. Feeling guilty about talking back to my dad like that, I started to help him at his factory after school. While helping out, I began to immerse myself in the work at the factory. I decided that I wanted to work at Dad's factory after graduating from high school. But as soon as I told Dad about it, he got furious. "Working here as a helper and as a regular employee are not the same." I retorted, "I know that. I just want to contribute as an employee at your factory." But he responded back, "You are so naive to think like that." After the argument, Dad calmed down and said, "It's not that I don't want to hire you. The best way for you to gain professional experiences is to get a job at a different company." I was persuaded by Dad and decided to work at another factory. It's been 10 years since then. I'm now the same age as Dad was when he started the factory. For the past 10 years, I've thought about Emily every day, put my painful feelings into my work. Emily might not have any feelings for me anymore, but I'll become a capable man. Come to get to you, Emily. Until then, please don't choose any other man. With such hopes, I devoted myself to my work. One day, Dad had a heart attack and collapsed. By the time I rushed to the hospital, Dad had passed away. There was no time to mourn, and with the handling of many visitors, the busy funeral came to an end. As soon as I got home after everything was over, I was hit with intense sorrow and regret. I kept opposing Dad and only focused on my work after graduating from high school. I didn't do anything nice to him. As I was crying out these words, Mom said to me with a somewhat complicated expression, "That's not true." "What do you mean it's not true?" When I asked that to Mom, the doorbell rang. When Mom opened the door, there was Bob standing there. Bob said, "My condolences," and then stared at me and said, "With your dad's passing, it means that you, his son, will have to take over the debt repayments." I was taken aback by the sudden turn of events, and I retorted, "This is a lot to handle. Can you just spare us some time to mourn?" to Bob. Bob laughed a bit and said, "No worries, you don't need to pay anything. Just marry my daughter." After saying that, he left with a very satisfied look on his face, saying, "I'm expecting a good response." "What was that all about?" I mumbled, still in shock. My mother, seeing my confusion, explained, "In truth, before your father passed away, Bob would frequently come to the factory, always demanding either debt repayment or a marriage between our children. The stress dealing with him kept building up in your dad." She trailed off, tears streaming down her face. She handed me my father's diary, filled with detailed entries about Bob's visits, the discussions they had, and his worries that he didn't want to burden us with either of the deals. After my father's death, I began to understand the hardships he had been through. Every single day, Bob would show up at our house or my workplace, yelling, "If you can repay, at least have a meeting with my daughter. I can't handle this. I've been so anxious lately that I can't sleep well. He took my beloved father's life, and now he's coming for mine," I thought. Fear of Bob led me to agree to meet his daughter Emily again. I realized I hadn't spoken much to Emily since graduating elementary school. Plus, I worried she might still hold a grudge because of the trouble in junior high school. However, I was still in love with Emily. I was looking forward to seeing her. I was also filled with anxiety about the meeting. At the meeting, Emily said, "Hello, good to see you again," in a strangely distant manner. She must dislike me for real. I thought to myself, and I lost my words. As our parents chatted amongst themselves, the meeting continued in silence. "Well then, why don't you two talk things over?" At the words of Harper, the moment my mother and Emily's parents left the room, Emily's face, which had been dispirited until now, suddenly brightened up. "I'm sorry about my dad. He can be quite pushy. There's something I want to discuss with you." "Here's my number," she said, passing me a note with her phone number on it. As I was about to respond, Bob opened the door and walked in. "You two have always been close. There's no need to discuss anything now, so, what are you going to do?" he asked. It had only been a minute since we'd been alone. I felt a great sense of regret for the lost opportunity to talk with Emily. However, I now had Emily's contact information. I told Bob, "We'll decide what to do ourselves and report back to you later," and then I left the room. After the meeting, Emily and I talked on the phone almost every day. "I've always cared about you, Aiden, but in middle school, our classmates made fun of us, so I could only act cold towards you," she confessed. We were torn apart in junior high school because of Bob's meddling. However, our feelings for each other hadn't changed. That would be the same no matter how many years, or even decades, passed. I've always thought of you too, Emily, but I've been worried that you hated me because of what happened back then. I said, I never hated you. I've thought about you every day. Emily replied, sobbing on the other end of the line. Same here. You were in my thought and prayers for the last 10 years. I admitted, tears welling up in my own eyes. As we confessed our feelings for each other after 10 years and my heart filled with feelings for Emily, a question suddenly came to mind. Why has Bob been so forceful about us getting together? The answer to my question came quickly in my conversations with Emily. Apparently, Bob had been eyeing my father's factory's state-of-the-art machinery. My father's factory had been in financial trouble and had debts, but it was equipped with all the machines Bob had ever wanted but couldn't afford. My father was a skilled craftsman but was not adept at machines. Bob would look at the unused machinery at my father's factory and would say, "What a waste. If it were me, I'd make full use of them," and had set his eyes on them for a while. His plan was to take me in as Emily's husband, make me work for free, and take over the factory and the machinery. Plus, he was aiming to receive my father's inheritance. All of Bob's scheming was documented in the materials Emily showed me. So, even with a little debt, if you get your hands on that machinery, you could make a profit many times over. I read a part of the materials out loud, stunned. In a voice filled with anger and sorrow, Emily told me, I believed in him, even though he's pushy sometimes, that he'd try to make things work with you and me for my sake. But since I was in high school, I began to suspect his persistent actions and started doing some research. Stunned and speechless, I listened as Emily continued. There's evidence of my dad's wrongdoings. I can't forgive him anymore. I'll expose him. Surprised by Emily's words, I asked, then will you let me help you? Emily and I went to a lawyer's office with the documents of the master plan created by Bob. I knew you were stubborn and twisted, but I didn't think it was this bad. I can't be with you anymore, Bob. Bob, informed about the divorce by his wife, stormed into my office. The sound of crashing vases and pottle echoed throughout the office, followed by the screams of the staff. Following Bob's arrest by the police for property damage, his factory workers reported to the labor board how Bob harassed them to work overtime, unauthorized. Losing his skilled craftsmen, Bob's factory went out of business in no time. Emily and I officially started dating and are now married. There was a time when things were so hard that I almost gave in to my parents' demands, but I'm glad I stuck to my beliefs, Emily said. The 10 long years of not being able to be together only strengthened our feelings for each other, I replied. After our marriage, we continue to share our thoughts and feelings with each other. After getting married, I quit my job at the factory and took over my father's. Emily started working as a secretary in my factory after our marriage. We support each other in our personal and professional lives. We respect each other as an individual, nurture our relationship, and lead a happy life.